Good day, guys. Today's video topic is determining family relationships and connections from a red pill / self-aware type of perspective. And it's ironic because I was recently on a live stream that Reverend 20 Piece hosted with a lot of other pretty prominent guests on that stream. And the topic of that live stream was, just broadly speaking, friends and family who are not red-pilled and sort of trying to deal with people that aren't going to be on board with your way of living because you have more of a mindset that is in tune with a red-pilled or MGTOW way of going about life. And a lot of other people in your family and your friendship circles aren't going to have that same idea in mind. They're not going to be on board with that. And it's ironic because I recently got done making a list of videos that I wanted to cover on my channel. And this took like a few months to really organize and get to where I wanted it to be. And the first thing on the list was basically this topic, or something a little bit more specific, but very similar to that, in terms of discussing how being red-pilled, so to speak, changes your perspective in a better way for how you navigate your relationships with your family in particular, how you navigate dealing with particular family members that may not actually be facilitating what you want to do with your life. And so what I've come to conclude, especially over time thinking about this more, I've really reached the conclusion that one aspect of the red pill, and you could define that in certain ways, but we're talking about the red pill of how you are treated in society as a man, right? The red pill of realizing that we don't live in a patriarchy and men don't abuse women any more often than the other way around. And in fact, the opposite's true more often. Women abuse men more often than the other way around because they can get away with it, right? The realization that you as a guy are not really valued very much in society anymore. You're just viewed as a utility object primarily. That's more or less what I mean by the red pill here. How society really views you as a man. When you have that perspective and that understanding, a big part of that is that you don't have an obligation to maintain relationships with any particular members of your family if you determine that person to have a toxic impact on your life, right? If that person doesn't have a positive connection with you, if that person doesn't have a reciprocal relationship of some form with you, and they're basically taking away from your life and they're making your life worse, you don't have an obligation to have any sort of connection with them. We are taught, especially as boys growing up in this society, that you have to love people that are related to you almost no matter what they do. But this really just isn't the case for any justifiable reason today. And again, that is part of the red pill mindset, I think. That is part of the understanding that you can reach when you realize where men really are in society today, and how a lot of what men do is really underappreciated or not appreciated at all, and how you can really very easily get into situations where you're doing things for people that would never do anything similar for you basically ever. A big part of this realization, I think, is understanding that the reason why you're taught this from being a young kid, being a boy onward, is so that you will be exploitable, so that other people can basically, in your family, continue to treat you poorly. And because you're taught that you're supposed to deal with these negative influences no matter what because they're related to you, that can basically be used to continue to have access to you long after you should have really stopped dealing with that person. In other words, it facilitates usury. It facilitates being able to take advantage of you no matter how poorly you're treated, if that person's related to you and you have been taught your whole life that you're just supposed to put up with that anyway. And one of the sort of instrumental figures that I really don't watch his content much anymore because it's not on YouTube, and most of it is just his particular talk show, is Turd Flinging Monkey. And I've talked about his channel in the past, I'm sure, but a lot of his early videos were about this topic of you don't really owe toxic family members anything. If you can't have a healthy, mutually beneficial relationship with someone, regardless of whether they're related to you or not, they don't really have to be part of your life. And I remember a lot of his early content kind of helped me evolve my thinking on this issue from a red pill sort of self-aware type of perspective, where I've come to understand that, yeah, you don't owe people anything if they're not playing a positive role in some form in your life. You don't necessarily have to get as much back as you're putting in, I don't think, but there has to be something positive there, right? That person can't just be making your life miserable and then at the same time benefiting from what you do for them. That's not a healthy connection, regardless of whether that person's related to you or not. And so a lot of TFM's earlier stuff was about that. It was about the idea that really, once you get to a point as a man where, and I'm putting this in my own words, of course, but once you get to a point as a man where you realize that society basically hates men, and society basically wants to take advantage of you as a decent guy, and it's up to you to sort of basically filter the people out that are going to treat you that way. It's up to you to vet pretty much everyone. Then you can get to a point where you can have healthy connections with people in your family who actually treat you like family. And I know a lot of TFM's early stuff was kind of on that topic, and he kind of helped me get started in terms of going through this mental process. I'm lucky enough personally to have a healthy family in general, but there are still some people on either side of my family to some degree. There's a couple people that I have in mind in particular who they're not people that I want to have connections with, who basically have had a view against me my whole life for things that I really didn't have any sort of control over, things that really weren't influenced by any decisions I made, but it was just sort of an automatic thing from the time that I was young, jealousy, resentment, that sort of thing. And I'm not going to go into that too much more because it's not really that important, but I've learned to let go of those kinds of people through this type of understanding that you have to have reciprocal positive connections with people, mutually beneficial connections with people, regardless of whether they're related to you and whether they're technically your family or not. In reality, we can choose our own inner circle of people that we call family. And people who are related to us can certainly have a favorable starting position, right? I'm not saying these things are unrelated, where you don't give people in your family more of a chance, people that you're related to more of a chance to have a positive connection with you, because most people, even most people that are red-pilled or MGTOW, I'm sure would prefer to have healthy connections with members of their family. They'd prefer to have positive relationships, positive again, not in the sense of this woo-woo emotional positivity, but in the sense of beneficial, in the sense of healthy. We prefer to have those kinds of connections with the people that are supposed to love us and who we can love in return. But in reality, we have to choose who those people are, and those people who are related to us may have a favorable starting position, but we ultimately need to decide who we consider family based on merit and based on these healthy sort of interactions that we hope to have with the people that we're actually related to. The only special sort of consideration or exception to this may be the parent-child relationship, and I think I should also say that I'm talking about adults with this conversation, right? I'm talking about adults with the points that I'm trying to assert here. I'm not talking about, well, your 15-year-old kid says they hate you, so you should be done with them. No, I'm talking about people that are full-grown adults, capable of doing their own thing and making decisions fully for themselves, right? But even after a certain point, if you have an adult child or if you have a parent, which you see is the case more often, who everything is toxic with them, and you've tried to work things out and you've tried to be supportive of what they say and do, but they just treat you like crap and they just try to use you and they try to basically, again, take advantage of this assumption that you're supposed to care about them no matter what because they're your parent or they're your adult child. There is still a point where you cut ties. If it's so toxic that they're constantly trying to lie about you or steal from you or do bad things to you, even if they're your parent or your child, assuming again we're talking about adults, there's still a point where you pretty much stop dealing with them and stop interacting with them as much as you possibly can. I would argue with the parent-child relationship in particular that maybe you leave the door open so that maybe you can have some form of connection with them or relationship with them in the future. But that's up to everyone to decide, again, based on what kind of interactions you think you can have with them. If they've shown that they're not going to, in a sincere way, try to have any sort of positive relationship with you, then you probably are better off just ignoring even your parent in that situation, right? If it's to the point where they've played games and they've just used you time and time again, then even in that situation, you probably want to keep as much distance from yourself and that person, even if it's your parent or your grown child, as much as you possibly can. But again, that's an exception. In general, it doesn't even come down to that. It's just a matter of, can I have realistically a reciprocal, mutually beneficial connection with this person? Is this person on my team in life? And if they're not, to heck with them. That's really what it comes down to, because there is no obligation to continue to associate with anyone that is toxic to your life, regardless of whether you're related to them or not. In an environment, in a society that was different, where families may have had to stick together more and be more reliant on one another in the sense that they had to have your back as well to some degree, that was expected of everyone. Not just a case where, well, you're a man, so you're just supposed to do things for your family no matter what. That might be a little bit different to some extent at least, but in this environment that we have today where, especially as a man, you're not respected, and to a large degree, no one's going to do anything for you, or the people that do things for you do have a place in your life, but you've got to be able to weed out the people that aren't on your team in life, that aren't going to be supportive of you, that aren't going to care about your well-being. The whole family dynamic, guys, is torn to hell anyway. It truly is. In today's environment, the family dynamic is pretty much screwed. And you're lucky, as I am, if you have certain people who are related to you who actually treat you like family. But everybody else, guys, you really don't have an obligation to do anything for, honestly. So in the end, I think it's fair to say this. We are taught to love those related to us as family, no matter what, primarily so that we can be taken advantage of by toxic people and toxic influences. But we actually have the option of entirely rejecting those people with whom we can't have these kinds of positive interactions and relationships, even if society tries to punish us from walking away from these people. And that will happen too, guys. As kind of a final point to make in this video, you will have situations where it's like, you know what? I'm an only child, so I don't have the sibling thing going on. Maybe that has helped me reach these conclusions. But if you do have a brother or a sister that treats you like crap, if you basically say, you know what? I'm done with this person. This person's not a positive force in my life. I can't have a healthy connection with them based on mutual reciprocity. I'm just going to kick that person out of my life and not deal with them anymore. You're going to have negative blowback from other members of your family, right? You're going to have people tell you, oh, you can't do that. They're your brother. They're your sister. That's just a really kind of clear-cut example because it's someone close to you that's not a parent. That's why I use this to sort of exemplify what I'm talking about here. But really, you're going to have sort of negative opinions or outcomes sometimes for this. And I think it's important, again, it's just sort of a final point, to realize that, you know what, if other people demand that you need to associate with someone that's toxic with you, maybe you need to consider not dealing with them either. That's sort of what you have to be willing to do, in my opinion, when you basically cut people out of your life like this, right? There can't be a reconsideration just because other people try to pressure you into this from your family or from society that say, oh no, you have to love your sibling or you have to engage in this sort of frenemy relationship. Frenemy relationships are pointless, and that's a different topic for a different day. But that's sort of a feminine way of looking at it, honestly. Women have frenemy relationships with other women, right? And you can see the drama and the toxicity involved in that. I don't believe in that. Either you have a generally healthy connection with someone or you don't. And I think that applies well to this family dynamic of how to navigate your relationships with family members from a red pill / self-aware point of view. In other words, you don't have these sort of frenemy, toxic relationships with people. If you can't have a positive connection with someone, maybe with the exception of the parent-child relationship, you are better off just cutting those people out of your life regardless of whether they're related to you. It should be based on merit. It should be based on whether you can actually have a positive, healthy connection with that person. And yes, people that you're related to may get more consideration. They have a more favorable starting point. But when all is said and done, it's still important to weed out the people that are only a toxic force or factor in your life and only have connections with people that actually treat you like family on that basis.